This piece of brick with melted metal was found by Soviet soldiers in Berlin in the office of Adolf Hitler in the Empire Chancellery, the Reichskanzlei, in May 1945. This stone was Brest Fortress. But nobody knows today why Hitler kept it in front of him and what he was thinking about.
However, without any doubts, Hitler remembered Brest during all 4 years of the war. It didn't get lost among the hundreds of battles. It was the first step of the Reich defeat.
Within 2 hours, fell into rank and listened to the Führer's orders. We were told why we were there. We were there not to depart to Persia, but to punish England upon authorization of Russia, and not to dull vigilance of the British, and then to quickly transport troops to the English Channel and to debark in England. No, we, soldiers of the Great Reich, will be in war with the Soviet Union itself. But there's no force that can impede movement of our armies. It will be a real war for the Russians, and it will be just victory for us. We pray for it. Well, I woke up early in the morning and was lying in bed without sleep. I remember there was a roaring like airplanes flying, then explosion, then second, then third, then it became a real wave. A hurricane broke out above our heads, so much strength we had never seen before. And later, during the war, our division took part in the first artillery attack. First went all division artillery, with 9 light and 3 heavy batteries. Then 2 additional squadrons of mortars and the 4th Special Operations Regiment. Vehicle-mounted launchers for heavy rocket mines made 2,880 shots during a short period.
First bombs and first shots of the German Chronicle. Together with the Wehrmacht troops, a huge army of cameramen from the Ministry of Propaganda went to the east. Soldiers with cameras take seats in the cockpits of bomber aircrafts. They are in the front rows of the attacking units. They film for a new movie, Victory in the East. First episode of the conceived cycle, Victory in the West, has already been released. Denmark, Holland, Belgium, Luxembourg, France, Paris, a swastika above the Eiffel Tower, and a parade of German troops on the Champs-Élysées. The German people like such shots. Brest was crowded with people on the evening of June 21st. Those who were lucky enough to get tickets were hurrying for the concert of Moscow artists. There was music and singing on the dance floors in the fortress. People watched movies, Valery Chkalov and The Circus, in summer cinemas. No need to hurry back home and get enough sleep on Sunday. On June 22nd, all artillery of the 12th Army Corps of the Wehrmacht opened fire on the sleeping fortress. Everything was planned to the last minute. Every 4 minutes, the zone of fire is moved 100 meters forward. After this precisely planned hell on earth, everything shall be torn to bits.
It was important on the grounds of psychological nature to open short but massive fire from all attacking means. I was on duty on the 22nd. On duty, here is the window, and I was sitting behind the window from that side. Yes, from that side. And when everything started, pieces of glass started flying, and it caught me. I got everything immediately, fell down to the floor and waited. They will never get me so easy. I moved here, closer to the wall, and was lying still. Everybody, not just me, got down from the beds and waited. We were hiding until everything ended. Where to run? Everything is in fire, and they cover every inch with the fire. Yards, buildings as well. It was a real hell. Nowhere to run, everything is in fire, and this artillery fire lasted for 45 minutes.
Pyotr Bondarev, direction layer of the 98th Anti-Tank Battalion, had done his service in the fortress since March 1941. He was sent from Brest to Vysokolitowsk to replace senior conscripts. The service went on perfectly. During the spring exercise, he hit a moving target on the second try and was granted a vacation. Soldiers who were talented in addition to having a secondary education were a real rarity and were chosen by commanders for political lectures. In mid-June, he achieved the rank of junior political instructor. June 22nd was when he should have received the tabs with 4 triangles before the general parade. The Germans didn't wait for such serious strength from the fortress. The main forces of the Brest garrison were in summer camps. Only 7 battalions stayed in the fortress: logistics units, repairmen, and commanders' families. Construction of this powerful fortress in the western part of Russia started in 1833, on the island near the junction of Mukhavyets and Yuzhny Bug rivers. The center of fortification was the citadel, a polygonal barrack.
The width of its external walls, which had gun ports and embrasures, was about 2 meters. Internal walls were about 1.5 meters thick. Its 500 casements could locate a garrison, about 12,000 soldiers and officers, with necessary stock of provisions and armaments.
The fortress is protected by Treyaspolskaya, Bobrinskaya, and Volinskaya fortifications from the west, north, and south. A 10-meter earth rampant with casements inside goes around the external perimeter. 4 islands enclosed by rivers and ditches are connected by 9 bridges. 9 more external forts were built by the end of the 19th century, and in the beginning of the 20th century, the frontal fortifications were reinforced again. But with the appearance of bombing aircraft and long-range artillery, this powerful citadel became a big barrack. In the case of danger, troops had to just leave it. But it was almost impossible to exit through the narrow gate under enemy fire. General Heinz Guderian. He already captured this fortress in 1939 and knew its disadvantages. Then Brest stayed under Wehrmacht rule for almost a week, until it was transferred to the USSR. The Germans studied the structure of the fortress in the smallest details, and they now tailored all upcoming action using a mock-up. Fascist infiltrators had been operating in Brest a couple of days prior to the invasion. The first 4 minutes of the shell attack seemed to last an eternity. At 3:19, German attack fighters of the first tier launched boats and head to the other bank of the Bug, to the east.
When we ran out of our flat, rounds were bursting, aircrafts were flying, and we were running as the other people. For some reason, everybody was running to Yuzhny Bug. I don't know why everybody was running there. Mum was barefoot, and her feet were wounded. There was such a roaring rave, and we all ran under this staircase and in the basement.
In 1945, the infantry division that was assaulting Brest had special status with the Führer. The division of former Austrian army was formed in the native land of Hitler, near Linz. Personal devotion to the Führer is cultivated in this division. Soldiers of the division were first to enter Paris. They fought in Belgium and Holland. They took fortified Warsaw. Everybody expects fast victory from them, and they have no doubts about it, as they have no doubts in the genius of their commanders. 3:15, 3:19, 3:23, 3:27. The avalanche doesn't stop. Deformed land is immediately captured by the advanced forces. At 3:40, diving bomber aircrafts make a joint attack. They pass quickly Yuzhny Island, hosting only storehouses and hospitals. They finish the sick people directly on their beds with their rifle butts. Others are killed selectively. But on Zapadny Island, attackers are met by the fire of the border guards from the 9th Border Station. The border guard stops the enemy, but not for long. Centers of the resistance have been localized. The German forces break into the citadel through Tiraspol Gate. They take some encasements of the radial barrack, officers' dining room, club, and former church.
The Russians were taken up from their beds by our fire. It was clear, as first captives were in their underwear, but they surprisingly quickly formed combat groups behind our advanced companies and started to organize desperate and persistent defense. Our casualties, especially among officers, reached tragic size in short time.
By the middle of June 22nd, we had to send footage of the Brest Fortress capture back to Berlin. Reporters wait for effective plans, white flags of capitulation, raised hands, and captured colors. These shots will appear in the propagandistic movie Capitulation of Brest-Litovsk as quickly as possible. During a victorious procession through Europe, German divisions had propaganda companies in their structure. Specially selected soldiers were making up these companies, who could write, take shots, convince, and fight. The dust kicked up by the boots of marching soldiers and tanks was still in the air, and generals in the general headquarters were already watching fresh shots of a regular blitzkrieg. Weekly victorious editions of the newsreel Wochenschau were persuading Germans of the invincibility of the German army.
We took the church. Halt your fire on the square.
The Red Army Club was a very good point. We can place our fire on the entire yard of the citadel from here. 2 hours of war passed. Attackers behave like they are at home. They don't bend down while walking. Defenders are bloodless because of the shell attack, so no need to hurry. The Germans even have enough time to be curious. But the tourist placidity of the attackers does not last long. They will soon understand that the surviving Red Army men have regained their consciousness and are ready to fight. The southeastern part of the barracks is occupied by the 84th Rifle Regiment. Its commander, Yefim Fomin, without waiting for clarification of the situation, organizes soldiers and orders Komsomol organizer Matavoisian to perform the first counterattack and knock the enemy out of the citadel. Soldiers rushed to the attackers from the side of the Komsk Gate. They were equipped differently. Somebody was even equipped with pioneer spades.
We jumped over dead bodies of my friends, and the Germans, wounded, were first to attack. Loud Russian hooray is still sounding in my head, and it turned to be stronger than artillery preparation.
The Germans attempt to retreat, but they end up in the crossfire from the barracks of the 33rd Regiment and the border guards of the 9th Border Station. After unsuccessful attempts to escape and having lost almost half of the squad, the fascists stay in the club. Artillery is no longer able to help the German soldiers since they are too close to the positions of the Russians, and Soviet snipers make it impossible for them to fight their way to the soldiers caught in the citadel.
I saw 3 soldiers 300 meters away on the roof of the casement. I wanted to open fire, but was afraid they were our friends. It shortly turned out they were Russians and very crafty shooters. They took ground on the edge of the casement where they could be reached with only very enormous efforts.
These snipers shoot the operators of machine guns from the platoon of Lieutenant Rinch when the latter tries to change their position. A bullet pierces the lung of Lance Corporal Teuchler. The cannonade was still on when Ivan Akimoshkin, Chief of Staff, runs into the positions of the 98th Artillery Squadron. He brings to life unconscious soldiers and orders to release rounds and deliver projectiles.
Then, after being done, I run out as I was dressed, and Chief of Section runs after me. We run to cannons. Our battery commander, Kaganovich, was there. We came and everything was a mess. We took it and back here, and we brought it up to the rampart.
By 7:30 in the morning, the fortress that felt destroyed recoups again. Defense is organized by the entire perimeter. The Kobrinsk Gate is protected by the 98th Anti-Tank Artillery Squadron. The 125th Regiment conducts battle in the northeast of the citadel. Political officer Yefim Fomin commands in the southern and southwestern barracks. The western area is protected by the soldiers of the 44th Regiment. The eastern and western forts are kept by the soldiers of the 393rd Special Aircraft Battalion and small groups which failed to leave the fortress during the first hours of the battle.
There are around 400 soldiers in these casemates, soldiers and commanders from different units and forces. Families of commanders also arrived here. Nobody knew anybody. There were no commanders here in the first minutes of the war. A couple of hours later, commander of 44th Rifle Division, Major Garilov, fought his way to here and organized defense on this section. He broke down all personnel to squads and companies and pointed out their sectors of defense. Defense staff was created under command of Captain Kazatkin. Hospital was organized under command of Raisa Abakumova.
Artillerists who have survived after the fire, among whom there is a direction layer, Bondarev, bring their light .45 calibers up to the fortress rampart. It gives a clear vision of the vehicle with Hitler's soldiers. They are behaving as though they are on a leisure trip.
They were already on Kobrinsk Highway. We turned back. They didn't even notice us. When we opened fire, I shot. They took mines immediately.
Defenders conduct battle for 10 hours. Fomin regularly sends intelligence groups to Brest and Kobrin, but they do not return. Nobody knows the real situation, and Brest was completely captured by the enemy at 12 o'clock. All means of retreat were cut off, but contrary to Hitler's forces' expectations, resistance was just increasing. Attempt to capture the fortress at once failed. The attack died out. At 13:15, the German command throws 133rd Infantry Regiment into battle, with no result. An assault gun battery is moved forward. They are supported by the fire of 9 200mm mortars. Everything is to no effect. The fortress furnishes resistance. At 14:30, commander of the 45th Division arrives to the section of Kobrinsk fortification occupied by the Germans to personally assess the situation. He becomes confident that the infantry is not able to take the citadel on its own. Schlipper orders to move back the infantry after it gets dark and to resume major caliber fire. It was the first attack of the renowned 45th Division since the beginning of the war in Europe.
21 officers and 290 non-commissioned officers and privates were killed by the evening. Commander of the 3rd Battalion, Captain Praxa, and commander of the 1st Squadron of the 99th Artillery Regiment, Captain Kraus, together with their staff officers, were on the casualty list as well.
Meanwhile, there is busy but joyful activity in the Führer's general headquarters in Berlin. Within several hours of the first day of the war, the German troops advanced into the Soviet territories for tens of kilometers. But the Führer was slightly nervous. Command of the Fourth Army doesn't report for some reason about the capture of Brest, and the 45th Division should have moved forward several hours ago. When the Führer finally gets the report that the fortress assault will resume tomorrow, he can't believe what he hears, but he doesn't lose his temper in order not to cast gloom on the successful day. Brest was important for Hitler both as a military site and as a symbol. It was here in 1918 that the Soviet army got down on their knees and accepted the splendor of Germany by unquestioningly accepting all the conditions of their victors. But then came shame for Germany in the Versailles Treaty, and Russia terminated the Brest Treaty. It should be punished, and punished here in Brest. Moreover, Brest Fortress couldn't be bypassed.
Brest Fortress had key position, and primarily its citadel, which already played an important role in 1915 and 1939. It was impossible to bypass the fortress and leave it uncaptured, as it blocked important Bug River crossings and approachways to both tank highways that had decisive importance for transportation of forces and for supplies.
According to the plans of the German command, troops aimed at Moscow shall be moving through Brest in a non-stop mode. Hitler's generals believed that the fortress was a serious obstacle, but they didn't consider it as a powerful defensive barrier.
On the first day of the war, Private Vasilikovsky brought me a holder with a military topographic map that he'd taken from a killed fascist officer. The map revealed all intentions of the enemy's command to us. Under the order, they should have captured the fortress at 12 on June 22nd.
Из этих ворот бойцы под командованием.
This is the gate where soldiers, led by the regimental political officer Fomin, started their counterattacks from.
Люди погибали. А позже 23 июня
These counterattacks died out. People died. And later, on June 23rd, the Germans shepherded people they captured there in the hospital, are wounded, women and children, in front of themselves.
женщин и детей. И они кричали за
And they shouted to the fortress defenders, "Shoot, shoot at us. Do it, but don't let the enemy go."
Враг не прошел. Все это происходило
All this happened here, in this place, on this bridge.
на этом мосту.
Когда нас вели в плен, на этом мосту,
When we were brought to prison, the Germans put several big guns on this bridge and opened fire on the fortress, and they convoyed us on this bridge and ordered us to lie down exactly near these guns. We and children lied down. You understand, when 4 or 5 cannons shoot at once, something happens in your head. You know, the brain is shaking.
он сейчас глухой, ну, совсем.
Slava got his eardrum blown, and he is completely deaf now. And I saw that Nina's hair turned gray. She was a small girl, and her hair was turning gray because of fear.
Сидеть от страха болоть.
Assault guns continue methodically firing on the fortress. All power of the artillery corps was thrown on these century-old walls. Shortly after that, they bought 2 super heavy cannons, 600mm mobile mortars, Karl. Each of them had its personal name. This one has the inscription Thor on its carriage. Projectiles weighing 2 tons each, making craters 10 meters deep. In Europe, just the appearance of Karl near the walls of the town under siege meant victory. In Brest, the first victim of Karl was 19-year-old German Private Werner. He died because of a heart attack at the first shot of this super mortar. His family received a letter saying that he died for the sake of the great Germany. Inactivity came at 10 in the morning.
Всякое сопротивление бессмысленно. Давайте! Всякое сопротивление бессмысленно. Давайте!
We had to make a message about giving up during breaks in fire to undermine the morale of the Russians.
They were partially successful. According to the report of the commander of the 45th Division, approximately 1,900 people gave up on the second day of the war. There were many women and children among them, but there were also military reservists.
While some of them were dressed as civilians, others wore military uniform. And they had downy pillows with them. So they carried these pillows on their chest, like bulletproof jackets. They tried to exit the fortress.
In the middle of June 23rd, Hitler requests an update regarding the situation in Brest. He cannot wait to move the general headquarters to the east, closer to the front line. During the war in Europe, general headquarters moved to the captured territory practically immediately after Reich troops crossed the border. Now, after receiving news from Brest, the Führer decided to wait. The third day of defense started with artillery fire, comparable to the beginning of the war in its strength.
The Hitlerites recognized insistence and courage of the defenders of Brest Fortress. But they couldn't understand why the fortress was still fighting and didn't give up. In the very beginning, nobody was going to defend the fortress. The Red Army men tried to escape from the stone trap, and few of them managed to do it, with great losses. Those who failed to fight through were waiting for help from friends and didn't know that the German tanks were near Minsk already. At 1900, I noticed my binoculars that a boy, small boy, 6 or 7, was walking on the road leading to the eastern fort, projectiles and explosions all around him, and he walks further, then he disappears.
After artillery fire, the assault platoon of the 133rd Infantry Regiment breaks into the citadel. This platoon releases the soldiers of the first tier of intrusion closed in the club. Battle is already conducted in encasements. At the same time, the biggest Koblensk fortification comes under attack. The enemy captures a majority of the main rampart, and this is where Captain Shablovsky's team is taken captive.
They brought Dad and military by the evening, so they were bringing them along these ramparts, yes, and they put them there. That's where they were standing, the military, and we were standing downhill, and we started shouting, "Mom, Dad, Dad." Well, I also shouted something to him. He couldn't hear me because, you know what was happening here. There was such yelling and shouting. Children were shouting. The only thing I could do was to watch. I saw that he was hardly standing. His soldiers were supporting him with hands.
Raisa Shablovsky was 8 years old then. She doesn't remember many events of those crazy days, but the most horrible moments in her life are with her forever.
Dad then pushed away his convoy because the latter was walking nearby and shouted, "Those who don't want shame of captivity, follow me." He jumped and got onto these guardrails and flew down. He was followed by other jumpers, but they were shot all at once. After that, we were brought back. Mom later told me, "He's our dad, maybe." His tunic was turgent and, you know, he was without belt. They took it from him.
Many commanders' wives fought together with their husbands in encasements. Attackers of the 45th Division report to their commanders about the women's battalion, but it was an exaggeration. There were no women's units in the fortress. June 24th, after the citadel was captured on the third day of the war, the command of the 45th Division makes their first report about capturing Brest-Litovsk fortress. And only after that, echelons with Hitler's general headquarters depart eastward to Rastopi town, but nobody knows about it in the fortress. The fortress keeps fighting. In the evening of the same day, in the building of the engineering barrack houses, the surviving commanders conduct short briefings. Its result was Order Number 1, the only document of the besieged garrison. And they didn't even have enough time to write it to the end because of the starting assault. But it is exactly this document that will save the names of commanders and numbers of fighting units.
We put our guns and opened fire on them. They thought it would be an easy walk, but we killed 20, 30, I guess they're people. We went there on all fours in the night. We took their food, drinks, and bags and brought everything back. We ate their German food. It was enough for 2 more days, and then we ran out of everything.
After the fall of the citadel, the eastern fortification became the main center of resistance. Attackers made many attempts to capture Koblensk rampart. but artillerists from the 98th Anti-Tank Squadron were strong in defense. They hit a couple of tanks and several armored fighting vehicles. When the enemy destroys cannons, soldiers with rifles and grenades go into casements. Volkenschau reporters filmed the captives with pleasure. No risk, but spectacular activity. But it's not enough for a full-size movie. The Ministry of Propaganda in Berlin demands only victorious footage from the Brest, but troops cannot provide them, so they do stagings as usual. Here is one of them.
A machine gun resumes fire protection of the advancing flamethrowers and demolition squads before the main defense line of the enemy.
Soldiers attack a permanent fire position. They keep it under machine gun fire. A flamethrower operator moves very closely and covers everything in fire, but nobody shoots back from the fire position, as there is nobody inside. But leadership and audience will like it. In a short time, Brest footage will appear in cinemas, but nobody will reveal that fights for the fortress are still on. Attacks and artillery coverage are combined with psychological treatment. The Germans call for giving up by means of leaflets. The Germans promise life and humane treatment.
And there, at that point, they put as they were able, I don't know, such device and shouted, "Russ, give up, end. We're in Smolensk already. We took Minsk, and you still fight here." Well, and we know it's bullshit. We know that our Red Army will come in any case. We had no doubts.
They shouted, "Rus, give up," but they didn't understand that Russians were not the only ones in the fortress. Belarusians, Ossetians, Ukrainians, Uzbeks, Tatars, Kalmyks, Georgians, Chechens. The fortress garrison was a small mirror of its motherland. Soldiers in 30 nationalities fought here, but they were all united as the entire country. It is impossible to get at the eastern fort. A perfect defense is arranged here. The defense was led by a major. The eastern fort is a horseshoe-shaped redoubt of the Kobrinsky fortifications. Major Pyotr Gavrilov is the commander of the 44th Regiment. Combat officer, participant of the Finnish War, he was nearly the only senior officer who was able to fight his way to the fortress to his unit. June 27th. By a twist of fate, this day was the date on which the Division Party Commission appointed hearing of the personal case of Communist Major Gavrilov. Some of his co-servicemen wrote an application on him, calling him an alarmist who persuaded his soldiers that war with the Germans was close. It must be said that Gavrilov didn't hide it, but the Party Commission session wouldn't look too promising for him, and it was the war that saved Gavrilov from reprimands. On June 27th, Schlipper reports about capture of the fortress again, and again it's a lie. The fortress fights on.
There was no water in the fortress located on 2 rivers and near bypass canals, and its defenders were suffering thirst. The point was that the fascists took the water pipes out of operation by artillery fire at the first assault of the fortress. Some defenders of the fortress state that the water disappeared a couple of hours before the beginning of the war. Every day we waited that there would be some rain, but there was no rain. And the air mixed with ash and dust made our throats sore. We wanted to drink. We opened the well, 2 meters deep, and the water came into the well from the German stalls. That is, gas mask didn't work. It was impossible to drink anything.
Ничего нельзя пить.
One must not drink water mixed with horse urine and manure, even if dying of thirst. That well, which became useless, was used for hiding the division colors and documents before the counterattack. They were going to take it after their return. Pyotr Bondarev also hid his Komsomol card in that well.
Akimochkin told us to get prepared and fight our way to this point. One soldier went and was killed. One soldier was sent, another soldier was sent, and he didn't return as well. Then 25 people or so gathered, took short rifles. We had nothing more, and a grenade, which were brought from the storehouse in the night. Yes, we managed to bring grenades, so we took the grenades and we were going to fight our way to the desired point. Let's go, let's fight our way. But as we got to the water, and some of us began to drink, here everything started. They started to fire on the water, the air, everything around us.
Mr. Shuk died in battle, and Lieutenant Akimochkin, after running out of ammunition, took the last group of his soldiers and went into hand-to-hand battle, and was taken captive after being heavily wounded. Brutal because of great losses, the fascists killed him on sight, and later in Brest they found and killed his children, 6-year-old Vova and 4-year-old Anya. Pyotr Bondarev received fragment wounds in that attack. The same mine killed political officer Siariev, who was running nearby.
Well, I was wounded by the mine that killed him. A grenade hit him in the stomach, and all his blood sprinkled at me, and fragments hit me at the legs. So he was hit in the stomach, and I was hit in the legs.
This is how he was taken captive. More accurately, he and people like him were not even taken captive, but rather gathered or collected. And the Germans were afraid to go into casements. The wounded kept firing. The captives were sent to take them out.
Wounded soldiers who remained in the fortress weren't able to exit, but they didn't give up. They kept fighting, and the flamethrowers were engaged. The Germans virtually burned out casements with defenders. Because of the hellish heat, and bricks and steel were melting, falling down from the walls like teardrops. Weapons, people, and walls turned into a single thing.
On the morning of June 29th, the Hitlerites delivered an ultimatum to the defenders of the eastern fort to give up and to issue Commander Gavrilov. Otherwise, the garrison would be wiped off the face of the earth. At 8 in the morning, Junkers throw down several 500-kilogram bombs onto the fort, but it withstands and the firing continues. In the afternoon, bomber aircraft show up again. The Hitlerites prepared for their last argument for the defenders. Following 500-kilogram ground bombs, one of the aircrafts throws a super-potent bomb weighing 1,800 kilograms. It pierces through the casements. The explosion shakes not only the fort, but all of Brest. After this explosion, attackers break into the fort.
People started collecting dead bodies. They were collecting here, there, everywhere. Healthy people wear our Red Army uniform. They put me onto wooden boards and drug me away. After the Polish wagons are arriving, they brought me across the river and took me to the Balea Podliaska camp.
On the 1st of July, the Germans again report to their command about the fall of the fortress. Hitler rebukes his generals for inaccurate reports. Perhaps it was his first show of anger in this long war. Fate was assisting Pyotr Gavrilov, commander of the brave garrison of the eastern fort. The Germans were confident he died at the bombing or killed himself, but he was hiding in the casements together with a couple of soldiers for 3 more weeks and continued to destroy intruders. When they surround and try to capture him, he, being wounded and stunned, manages to throw a grenade. It was July 23rd, the 32nd day of the war. The Hitlerites didn't dare to kill this captive. The German reporters didn't film the capture of the last defenders of the fortress. They weren't matching the script of the victorious movie. The movie had no success. Cameramen who failed to see the white flag were sent by the commander to Minsk and Smolensk. Films shot in Brest were used for production of Chronicle editions, though the final accord of the movie could be footage of Hitler and Mussolini visiting the Brest Fortress together in August of 1941. Hitler wanted to see these walls of the Russian citadel that hadn't given up, to understand why his renowned division was held here for so long. His generals couldn't explain the strength of morale of the fortress defenders. Hitler didn't believe in men of iron, he believed in iron machinery, and he was proudly shown defeated long-range guns and tanks. However, he was not told that defenders of the fortress didn't have these weapons, that these weapons were collected near Brest and brought here to make an impression and justify losses. Mussolini noticed a transcription carved into one of the walls and asked for a translation. "I am dying, but I will not give up. Farewell, my motherland." Duce was so shocked that he remained silent for a long time. And this is where Hitler picked up that brick with melted cartridges. But nobody showed Hitler the cemetery of the 45th Division. And nobody told about soldiers of the Wehrmacht continuing to die in the fortress, killed by shots of invisible defenders. He wasn't told the soldier's legend about Frau mit Automat, a ghostly woman from the casemates equipped with the trophy assault rifle. Soldiers tell her every shot is accurate. Soldiers say her every shot is accurate. Then she disappears underground, and her shots sound in other locations just as suddenly. All attempts to catch or kill her had no success. She could be noticed only at a distance. The appearance of this woman was scary. She looked like the spirit of revenge and death. Every time when going to watch in the fortress, the Germans prayed and wished to one another not to meet this woman. The day before the Führer's visit, 2 soldiers didn't come back from the watch.
Hitler left and Frau mit Automat remained. Who knows whether Hitler was able to continue the war against Russia? If he was told about her and other defenders of Brest Fortress who remained here to fight to the end, or if he would be able to understand that the fortress is not just walls, but people, first of all.